starting. Ready, set, go. Going live in 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Epic Gaming Night podcast, a podcast about the stories and relationships board games create. I'm your host, Roy Candy, and with me as always is Matt.
Oh god, I forgot to unmute. Hello.
And Rob.
Hey.
And we have a special guest on tonight, Ted from Bezier Games. What's going on, man?
Hey guys, glad to be here.
Awesome.
Whoop, whoop. Go Falcons.
Yeah.
Hi. So if anybody doesn't know who you are, Ted, can you just give our listeners a rundown on who you are?
Sure,
Social
absolutely.
Security number, credit card numbers, DOB.
We'll put
your
a link to all that
passwords.
Yeah.
Everything.
So I'm Ted Alspach. I'm the owner, along with my wife, of Bezier Games. And Bezier Games produces all sorts of great games: Castles of Bedford and Ludwig, Suburbia, Ultimate Werewolf, One Night Ultimate Werewolf, Werewords, New York Slice, Whistle Stop. Lots of stuff. Hopefully you guys have heard of. It's the best job in the world. I get to design some games as well as publish other people's games. And so that's what we've been doing for the last 4.5 years about, which is, it's like I said, best job ever. Absolutely love it. Love the industry, love games, and it's awesome to be a part of it this way.
That's awesome. I know I was talking to you before, but the One Night series is one of the games that we played a ton when my game group was first starting. I started a new game group with a bunch of coworkers, and we just played a ton of the One Night Werewolf series. It's definitely super exciting.
We hear that a lot. Certainly when we for playtesting, we knew we had something good for playtesting when the playtest groups that we had, we basically had to stop because they were closing up the venue that we were in. They're like, no, we need to leave because the security is kicking us out. And people wanted to keep playing. So that's a good sign where people are, and they're like, when are you going to do this again? We play it again some other time and whatever. And so, that was one of those things that we definitely knew right from the get-go that was going to be, was going to go over pretty well.
Well, at least it didn't kick people out for too much tapping on the table. That's awesome. But yeah, I guess we'll get right into all the things about your publishing and stuff. So how did Bezier Games start?
So, like everyone else, probably in the hobby, I played lots of games as a kid. I grew up playing games, played D&D, played video games. Still play lots of video games. Don't play any D&D.
Yeah, what are you playing right now?
Right, video games right now? Yeah. I just got Stardew Valley on the Switch, and I can't stop playing because it's awesome. I stayed away from it on my Mac and PC. I'm just like, no, wait, because I know it's going to be coming, and I'd rather sit back on the couch and relax and play. And also, it's so easy to get distracted when you're trying to do work, and you realize that I could just do just a day's worth of farming, just a day's worth.
Awesome.
And of course, then 6 hours later, you're like, oh my god, I have so much to do, and I'm so tired now. So Stardew Valley is what I've been playing recently. So anyway, playing lots of games, and at a certain point, I was designing games, but they were crappy party game sorts of things, like the stuff you find in the kiosk right before Christmas that you buy for people that you don't particularly know or like. So I was working on that sort of thing. Didn't publish anything, but I was working on things like that, and discovered
all the rolling moves.
Yeah, discovered modern games, and as soon as I did that, like many other people, when you jump in the hobby, you go feet first, and you don't look back, and you buy everything you can. You buy everything on BGG, the top 100. You're like, and I want that, and I want that, and I want that. I don't know what that is, but I'm going to get it. I'm going to find it. And so there's a little bit of obsession there. And then right after that, actually, the game design that I've been doing in the background kind of took a turn, and I started working on things that were like these newer games that I was playing, and designed some Age of Steam maps. Age of Steam maps were the first things that were actually sold kind of as an independent designer.
Oh, nice.
Then I sold a game to Atlas Games called Seismic, which they published without making almost any changes, which is really weird because I always thought that publishers would take your game and then make it really, really different and strange and unusual and maybe better, maybe worse, but they took it and it's pretty much the exact same game, like same art, same components that I gave them, the prototype components I had, everything. And
that's
it wasn't
crazy.
bad. I mean, because clearly that's what I gave to them, but I was really surprised and I kind of expected them to do more. And not long after that, I ended up starting Bezier Games and publishing my own stuff and kind of taking control over what was being published that way. Published Ultimate Werewolf, eventually Suburbia, and some of the other big box games. And now we've been working with a lot of great designers. We published a game from Tom Lehman and Friedemann Freeze, and this year Scott Caputo's Whistle Stop and Jeff Aller's New York Slice. Yeah, New York Slice. So yeah, I mean that's been great.
Okay, real quick, New York Slice. You're not a Chicago deep dish guy?
Love Giovanni's in Chicago is awesome. I'm a big fan.
Yes.
It's a fan. Although the chain that is in Indy, that particular location, they screwed us over when we were there for Gen Con. I was not happy.
That's the expansion. It's Chicago Slice.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But I like Chicago pizza, but I like New York pizza better. If I have to, if I was on it, there's really no question that I'm a New York Slice, New York pizza type of person. I lived in California for like 20 years now. At some point,
awesome. What part?
San Jose, and San Jose.
San Jose is nice. San Jose is nice.
It is gorgeous out there. People are super nice. The weather's amazing, but the pizza is terrible. People who like the pizza there are people who've never had pizza on the East Coast, clearly, because it's just not very good. California Pizza Kitchen, I'm like, God, really? Seriously? What are they thinking? It's just not, you don't put like Sprouts on a pizza. That doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that? If pizza tastes that bad, you have to put Sprouts on it to make it taste better. There's another issue you need to be concerned about. As far as I'm concerned, if a pizza isn't good with just cheese on it, you shouldn't be eating that pizza. If you have to put stuff on it to make it better. I like stuff on a pizza, but the core pizza needs to be pure. And if it's not good by itself, then I don't really want anything to do with it. So,
listen, if we ever meet up, I'm going to eat pizza with you because I feel safe now. I feel like Ted will know where to go.
That's awesome.
We'll do it. I love it.
Yeah.
So what was the first game that Bezier put out?
The very first game under the Bezier Games label was Start Player, and it was a kind of collectible start card game, which meant
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was a deck of cards that determined who went first in the next game you're going to play. You basically shuffle the cards, turn it over, and it says, hey, the person whose birthday is closest to today's date goes first, or the person who has more pockets goes first, whatever. And that was it. And it was fun to put out there. It was all, it's the definition of self-published. It was, you can kind of see behind me this little printer back, or actually a very large printer here, the predecessor to that one. So it's like 11 by 7 or 12 by 18 printer. It does really nice quality stuff. And printed things on there, cut the cards myself, packaged them myself. I got the tuck boxes printed separately, but I packaged everything myself and sent those out. And sold several hundred copies of the game originally. And did that for the first couple of games that I did actually were totally self-made. There was no, send it off to a printer and get it back 3 months later. It was make it all yourself, cut the cards, do the rules, find an artist, get it all done, all that sort of thing.
That's awesome. Cool.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead, man.
It's a game related question. I'm sorry, it's off topic. Okay. So, Ted, One Night Ultimate Werewolf. I don't know the background of how it got started, but I was first introduced to the game as Mafia. Have you ever heard of Mafia, where you have like the Joker and the Queen and other stuff like that?
Yes.
And now, obviously, they're similar style games. Was that the influence? Was that like the inspiration that you had to create a game that's more centered and more controlled and more to it? Because definitely Werewolf is better, not just because you're on the show, but just the components that are in there, the different characters that are allowed in there.
I think
it's more than just
the regular
monitor,
game was in the public domain, right, Ted? I'm sure Ted can tell us all about it.
So basically, Mafia's been around. Some say the 80s, some say before. It depends. The people who run certain things on the internet are very strongly opinionated. I don't have no idea why that is, but that does seem that way. And they think they know. But either way, it's been around for a long time. It's kind of a public domain thing that a lot of people have been doing. There were a couple published versions of the game before I made Ultimate Werewolf, but and I played those, and I really enjoyed the Werewolf game. But after playing with each of those a couple times, I was really frustrated that there were certain aspects about them I didn't like. So Werewolves of Miller's Hollow is one that was around, that was fairly popular in the early 2000s. And, it's got this very stylistic card art, which looks really cool, these square cards, and it looks really cool. But the big problem is on the back, there's these werewolf claws on every card, and the front is a stylized picture. And so sometimes people get the cards and they're like, am I a werewolf? Because there's like a werewolf thing on the thing here, and I don't know what this other thing is. And there's no words, there's no text on there, so they could be multilingual because that's cheaper for a printer, but it's kind of a cop-out because then it actually hurt the game because people didn't know what roles they were necessarily.
And the last thing you want in a social deduction game is somebody being like, okay, so I'm the werewolf, what do I need to do? No!
Well, not only that, but they're like, I don't know if I am a werewolf. Do I open my eyes? If I open my eyes and I'm not a werewolf, I've just broken the game. And that's not good. So there's that. And I don't want to be harsh on the game, but there's a lot of things I really, on the cards themselves, not only did not have the words, didn't tell you what the role did. So if you were just jumping in new and there were like 6 different roles, you pretty much had to have them memorized because, you can't ask for help. Like you said, you can't say, oh, by the way, what does the seer do again? Not that I'm the seer, but what does the seer? And then, of course, you're dead the next night because the werewolves kill you. So there was that. There was Lupus and Tabula, which was Mayfair had put out, which had another problem. They made all the villagers have different clothes. And so the game was basically, they delivered a broken game because people go, I'm the villager with the red shirt. Someone's like, I'm the villager with the orange shirt. I'm the villager with the overalls. I'm a girl villager with the blue shirt.
No, I'm the villager with the orange shirt.
The werewolves are like, I'm screwed is what I am. It's because they can't. And so you have to introduce a rule that you can't describe what's on your card, which is kind of ridiculous. So, a bunch of things like that. Looney Labs had a black and white card game with not great art called Are You a Werewolf? And that just had werewolves, a seer, and a whole bunch of villagers. And it only played 15 people, and someone died on the first night all the time, which is a terrible, terrible way to play the game because that means someone doesn't get to play. They're just out of the game instantly for no reason at all, which is doesn't exist in Ultimate Werewolf. That is not a rule, and that's a terrible rule. And that I can be harsh with because that's wrong for anything. Elimination is one thing, but elimination should be there as a driving force to get you to play well and to make you do something in the game and act differently, not just to randomly, basically it's rolling the dice and you're out.
You don't get to play the game today.
It's not even rolling dice. All you have to do, all you have to do is talk, and they'll kill you. Oh, he knows what he's doing. That'll be funny. Let's just kill him.
Well, this is even before you talk. This is the first night. These are the werewolves. All right, werewolves, kill someone this first night.
Oh, you don't even get to talk.
And that person's out of the game, and then the rest of the game starts, and the person's like, what the hell? That was not the most fun experience. So at least one of those 15 people is going to have a terrible first game experience, the worst possible first game experience you can have, and they're never going to want to play again because it's such a terrible thing. So, some people don't like elimination at all. I think it's actually a great mechanic to have in because it raises the stakes. It makes your actions and things that you do much more meaningful than if it's not there. It's nobody likes being eliminated, but the fact that there's that potential of being eliminated means you're going to act differently. And so I think that's a good thing, but not when it's handled that way. So there's different publishers that had Werewolf out there, which I played. And, I was like, well, these all have these various issues. So I made my own set of cards. And this is right after Bezier Games had gotten started. Well, actually, probably before Bezier Games had started, I made my own cards. And I was playing with my friends and family with the cards that I made, which had all the things. It had villagers that looked the same. It had lots of special roles. It had descriptions of the roles on the cards. It even had this very cool thing, a balancing mechanism, because that was the other thing was how do you figure out how many roles to have in the game and special roles and whatever. And so I basically just came up with a little plus-minus system that, a werewolf is -6 and a seer is +7 and whatever. And if you get to 0, your game is pretty well balanced. Not going to be perfect, but it's going to be really close. And you don't have to worry about a really unfair game one way or the other. And so a bunch of those things put that together. And, people really like that. And so, again, that whole handmade thing where I was cutting out the cards, packaging them up, selling people eventually. And I sold 800 copies of the original Ultimate Werewolf, the white box edition. Let's see, on BGG, it's pretty ugly. Those were all handmade and a ridiculous amount of time. And at a certain point, I was like, okay, I think I probably need to get these professionally produced because This is just taking up way too much of my time, and I'm not really happy with the results because you can only do things by hand to make them look so good.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how that got started, because I loved the game Werewolf. I just there weren't the tools to play it well. And, it was received really, really well for other people who liked Werewolf. So one of the quotes that's been on the back of the box for a very long time, probably 7-8 years now, is a quote from Tom. That's just Tom Bassel. He's like, it's the best it's the best Werewolf version of Werewolf there is, period, of anything. And that's kind of what I was aiming for. Again,
it's almost like the ultimate version.
And that was the thing, was, you know what, all these other ones, this is the ultimate version of Werewolf. This is the one. And and so that was the goal, is to create the best possible version of Werewolf, the one I wanted to play, which I think is always a good thing for a designer and a publisher to do, is making games that you really want to play, and making them as good as possible, because hopefully if you're going to be playing them or talking about them or whatever, you've got to be passionate about them. You got to enjoy playing them. And I still love playing Werewolf, and a couple times a year I'm in different groups that I get to play Werewolf. I don't get to play as much as I used to, but I still love playing it. So I always have a good time with that.
That's awesome. I'm sure we'll talk about a few more Werewolf games, because we got some social deduction games in your lineup. Are there any other games that you want to talk about that Bezier Games publishes in your catalog, and tell us a little bit about those?
Sure. I mean, we've this has been a big year for us. We've come out with a lot of games. The first game we came out with earlier this year is called New York Slice, which is the pizza game we're talking about. I am so excited that we were able to publish this game, because the predecessor to the game was called Piece of Cake, and it was a game about you have pies, which was weird why they called it Piece of Cake, and it was about pies. It doesn't make any sense. There's a long history to why it was that way, but it's still wrong. You buy a game called Piece of Cake, it should have cake, not pie. It should be called Pie something if it has pie. Anyway, but the game itself is great, because it was basically, there were 11 slices of this pie, and you have to divide them up, and then you do the splitting, and then everyone else gets to choose first. You get the section that's left at the end. And it was a great gateway game for people, and it was one of my wife's favorite games. It's something we would always take with us to, for family. Very, very easy to do. And the designer had also put out a bunch of other really good games in the past, like New Amsterdam and Heartland, and just some other really fantastic games. So I've been in contact with him. I kind of known him from a couple different of the conventions and things. And he had been sending me some prototypes to see if I was interested in publishing them. And I ended up not working on the prototypes he'd sent. But as we're talking about it, he mentioned that the license for that game was available. And
nice.
I was like, really? Huh. And the more we talked about it, the more we thought, we might want to just spruce it up a little bit, maybe add some other stuff to it, fix the whole pie cake thing, which is irritating to everybody. And then we ended up retheming it to pizza, and added some things in there, and ended up with a really, really cool game. And it's really richly thematic. It comes in a pizza-sized box, but it's a good game quality box, not a cheap cardboard thing. And it kind of looks like a fancy pizza box sort of thing. But all the pieces in it, it's got pizza slices, and they're on super thick cardboard. And the rules look like a menu, and the score pad at the end, it looks like a guest check from a restaurant. And it's a lot of fun. And that was a great experience to be able to work with, kind of one of my favorite designers on a game that I really loved, and to make it even better than it was, from the game that I actually enjoyed to start with. So that's one.
That's awesome.
There's all the games that we put out this year, I'm so excited about. We put out the latest, the One Night series, One Night Ultimate Alien, which is the 4th game in the series, where there's aliens now, and the aliens, everything that happens with the game, it's all dynamic, it's all app-based, and so everyone has special abilities, or different things that happen every game, so you're never going to have 2 games that are the same the way it works. So it kind of takes the whole One Night thing, doesn't really add new mechanics, but kind of takes the existing mechanics and twists them around a little bit, and keeps it really fresh. And there's Werewolves. Werewolves came out mid-year. Super excited about that too. It's a word game. It's kind of a combination of werewolf or One Night and 20 questions, where you've got a mayor who knows a word and wants the village to say the word so he can save the village from the werewolves. However, there's a werewolf in the game who knows the word too and is trying to prevent people from figuring out the word. And there's also a seer who knows the word and is trying to help the village. And you've got a limited amount of time to be able to do it. The mayor can't speak, and there's all this pressure, and it's very exciting.
And that's also app driven, right?
That is, yeah, it's actually app required sort of game. But the game comes now, the current version of the app has about 15,000 words in it. It's got these great new categories in there, in addition to kind of a general knowledge category that has over 10,000 words. It's got 3 new things in it for movies and music and the 80s, different areas. So you can mix and match any of those categories, or just use them, just want to focus on the 80s, you can do that, or you can kind of add all the music and the movie stuff to the general list and have a big 15,000 word list that it'll pick from. And there's different difficulty levels for the words and all sorts of things. So that's kind of exciting.
That's awesome. We were talking before about how apps in games like make you be able to do all sorts of interesting things with a game that you couldn't do before. So what is your thoughts about applications in games? I know because several of your games require them to work.
Yeah, so, well, only 2 right now actually require. So One Night Ultimate Alien requires it because of the dynamic changing of the roles, and Werewords because it has the word lists in there, and it also kind of controls. Well, the words that you see are based on basically what the mayor says. So it starts the game with the mayor who knows the word, and he has a secret role. So he can actually be a werewolf trying to lie and not let people know what the word is. And that may be the thing that, like, this mayor wasn't very helpful. He must be a werewolf. And of course the mayor's like, oh my God, I was trying to be as helpful as possible. Do you believe him or not with that? So that's a lot of fun. And meanwhile, the real werewolf is off in the corner just laughing hysterically, like, what a dumb mayor. Ha ha ha, he's going to die. I'm going to get away with it. But the app itself actually changes based on what the mayor chooses. So the mayor will choose, like, oh, I'm a werewolf. Well, then the mayor gets a slightly harder word or a list of words to choose from. So it helps him, and it's more likely that the group won't be able to guess the word. Or if he's the seer, there's no seer in the rest of the group to help them, so he gets to choose for some easier words. Now, that said, if he chooses a word that's too hard or too easy, the team that does not end up winning at the end may figure out that he is the seer or he is a werewolf, in which case he may end up losing for his team. So, there's a lot of different things going on that way, but a lot of that it's entirely only possible because of the app. Mm-hmm. Without having an app available, you just couldn't do that sort of thing. So the way I think of apps in general is just it's another component. It's like dice or cards or a game board or meeples or anything else. It's just a little bit more flexible than those. But at the same time, in a deck of cards, it's amazing what people have done with cards. Whether they're double-sided cards or they're depending on the orientation of the cards and things you can do. An app just kind of takes that to that next level.
What does the development of like the app look like? Is there a lot of rigorous testing you guys have to do, or like do you go back and forth with how does the whole process of getting an application made for your game work?
So we have an app developer that's a contractor that works with us that does a lot of our games and our helper apps. And for Werewords in particular, that was one of those things that, as the game started to be developed, we knew it needed an app. There was no way we could do it with cards. Gotcha. Or any other things. It's going to have an app. So from the beginning, that was a game we knew that it's going to be app-driven, or an app is going to be an essential component of that game. So the game and the app were kind of developed at the same time. And that's pretty atypical because a lot of times it's afterwards. There's a few instances of that in other board games, but for this, it was what can the app do, and then the game itself. How do we want the game to behave, and how do those two things interact? And you treat the app right now. It's like a very smart deck of cards in a lot of ways, because it shows you certain words based on, again, who the mayor is. Certain words will come up. The mayor gets to choose. He sees a list of words. He can choose the one that he thinks is going to be best for the group. So instead of just, this is the word you have to use, he's going to get one of many different ones to choose from. Then the app remembers that and shows that word to the werewolf and to the seer, and later on to the rest of the group. Based on if the people get the word right or not, the time changes, how much time they have to figure out who either the seer or the werewolf is at the end of the game. So a bunch of those little things like that are all the logic that's in there kind of makes the game work really, really well. And a lot of that's done through play testing. So we'll start with a build, and some of the stuff works, some of it doesn't. See what's there, start modifying the app. But yeah, the app was continued to develop until the board game was shipped off to our manufacturing partner. They were making the game. We were still working on the app and adding new things to it. So the first edition of the rules does not have things like our custom lists where you can add your own word lists, because we weren't sure if we're going to have that in time. That's awesome. It did make it in time for the list, but we can include it in the rules, so a lot of people don't even know it's there. And
That's
the
awesome.
next,
I didn't know it was there, and I played it.
yeah, you can just go into other options, and you can either paste in stuff, or you can go. There's a thing where it's got community lists, and people have created their own lists on werewords.com and saved them, and you can just pull those right into the app. So there are lists like there's lists about Pokemon and Disney and Chinese beginner words and all sorts of other things like
That's
this
awesome.
that you can just load in and use either by themselves or in addition to the other lists that are already in the app. And so we're continuing to actually develop the app, and we're adding more and more word lists and content and also functionality to it over time, which is kind of nice. So that you have the base WhereWords game, which is the cards and the tokens and kind of the box that has the cool tray in it. And from there, the app will continue to evolve over time. So the game will get stale.
That's one of the things that's really interesting about like apps and board games. Normally, if you want to change the board game a little bit, you would have to put out a whole expansion, send that off and get it published and then get it out to people. If there's an app in the board game, you can just push an update to people and they can immediately be able to, you could slightly tweak the game in different ways. Like if you had a role that everybody was complaining was overpowered, you could technically tweak that role in the app in some of these social games. That would be totally cool. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It's nice. It's flexibility, but again, there's an additional level of responsibility then as a publisher, which means that now we have an app that we need to support basically for all eternity. Because for the board game, typically your components, you're not going to wake up one day and go, oh, the dice don't roll anymore. Well, they did back in 2005, but ever since the 2010 dice rolling thing that happened, they don't roll anymore. Now you have to upgrade the dice, but with an app, we really have to make sure that it continues to work and it works on the current devices. So there's a little bit of kind of future thinking there that we need to make sure that all of that works. But that's part of what we're doing. I'm fine with that because I think we're going to be around for a long time, and we plan on doing more games that have apps. And I think as long as it enhances, I never want to make a game that has an app just to say, hey, what game can we make with an app? It's more of I want to make a game, and an app is the really only way to make that game a reality. Having that app there, and that's kind of what happened with WereWords. Is that app, the game wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the ability to have an app that has all this functionality in it.
That's awesome.
Well, see, I love the app, especially when I play with new people. And it's not just your company. I mean, Bezier, you guys do a fantastic games, but companies that do apps well for the games. When it comes to a teaching point of view, I do a lot of stuff with different groups or even youth things at church and stuff like that. And when I can pull out a One Night Ultimate Werewolf, and I have all these kids who are texting on their phone and not paying attention, but they can get their one character and they know what to do, and it's a fun, crazy experience. Probably by the second or third game, everyone's phone is down and they're all yelling at each other. And see, that doesn't happen if you don't have the app, because what's crazy is like millennials nowadays respond to technology. And so I think it's a smart way to go if the game needs it. And a game like that, it makes it more enjoyable. And so, I applaud you guys for doing that.
Good. Yeah, I think the one-night games, except for Alien, they don't need it, but they enhance it a lot. Eric Summer has done the voices for those games, and he just does an amazing job with it. It just adds a lot of richness to the environment and a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun coming up with the fun things that Eric says throughout there and the different way he intones things. The one-night game we're working on now, it's a one-night game, but it's slightly different, like as they all are in their own way. And we're having so much fun with some of the stuff that Eric gets to say. And I'm really looking forward to being able to get that out there.
That's awesome. Cool. So we've talked about some of the games you've had come out. Do you have any games that haven't yet been released that you're looking at releasing soon or that you're announcing?
So a couple that we have announced that don't exist yet. Of course, obviously, we're talking about there's another one-night game which we haven't talked about in detail yet. But there's Were Beasts. We just did a Kickstarter for that in September, which is a game. It's a semi-social deduction game. It's kind of a secret set collection game where you and the other people at the table are all secretly trying to collect these different types of were-beasts. So there's, of course, a werewolf, but there's a lot of other fun things like a were-kitten and a were-zombie and a were-blob, and, of course, the were-bago, which is, of course, a Winnebago and a person. But there's a lot of those things. You have two, like one on your right, one on your left. You're trying to collect, but the one on your right is being shared with the player to your right. The one on your left is being shared with the player to your left. So each of them know one of the things that you're trying to collect, but that's all the information that they have. They know what you're trying to collect, as well as what one of your neighbors is doing, or what half of what your neighbors are doing. And you're trying to secretly. There's the cards that come up that you're basically bidding for, and you're trying to collect the ones you have, because you're only going to get points for the ones that are your secret goals. But you don't want to be too obvious about it, because at any point someone can basically, when it's their turn, they can call you out and go, you know what, I suspect you of collecting where nanas. Where nanas, of course, are bananas that are. Anyway, so you're accused of collecting where nanas. If they're right, they're out of the game. They're eliminated. That other person's out. You get their cards, or their were chow. Were chow is what you use to bid, of course, because that's what all were creatures like, is were chow. It's nice little cans, and it's very nutritious. It's lots of villager in there. They're taking all their were chow. You're taking all their cards, and if you're right, but if you're wrong, the opposite happens. The person you accuse gets all of your stuff, and you're out. And so it's this kind of push your luck thing. You're like, have they been basically playing it straight and getting the stuff that they need, or are they just totally hoping that they get accused of something, and then they're going to try and grab your stuff? And it's kind of a very fun bluffing game, kind of a little bit of a coup-like aspect to it. In terms of do you want to be aggressive, or just kind of want to sit back and kind of let other people interact and hope that you're still doing well? And so that was on Kickstarter. That'll be out in February. So that's been announced, but it hasn't been. We'll be showing that at PAX and BGCon. Probably won't be showing it at Essen, because we don't have any copies there. We don't have anything that's real enough to play with at that point. So there's that. There's we've announced last year. We've announced Ultimate Werewolf Legacy, and that's due for release next year sometime. And that's really exciting. That is a tremendous amount of work, but the payoff is going to be amazing. And that's something I'm working on along with Rob Davio. And it's basically, Rob is pretty much doing it just to prove that Matt Leacock is not as talented as people think he is, and that he was really the brains behind Pandemic Legacy. That's my theory, at least. Because, I think we're going to knock it out of the park with this Ultimate Werewolf Legacy game. It's amazing. It is just a full-on, super cool experience. And it's, Rob has his real strength. I mean, he's got lots of strengths, but one of his real strengths is the storytelling aspect.
That's awesome.
And certainly anyone who's played through Risk Legacy or Pandemic Legacy or Seafall knows that there's like twists and turns and plot points and things that are really, really make the games really engaging. They're things you talk about, and there's certain things that happen in Pandemic Legacy that my wife is still mad about. And if I bring it up, she just gets this look on her face like, oh, that was the worst thing. And I'm like, you're right. It was really sad when that happened. But that's the sort of thing where you actually can have that sort of emotional attachment in the game, which is great. And Rob's really good at getting those sorts of things in games. And I think he's contributed a lot to the game, but that's certainly one of the areas of, that I think will really shine through. There's a lot of that kind of immersion that you get with Werewolf anyway. And what we've done with Legacy is even more of that. So that is super, super exciting. And that'll hopefully be out by middle of the year next year.
I think it'll be definitely super interesting to see a quick playing Legacy game, because most of these are like giant. I mean, I'm sure it's still going to be scenario based where you go through and things progress, but normally it takes a really long time to play through some of the games, and it'll be cool to see how the game ramps up and how decisions made stick with through games. Like, hey, are we just going to like rip a roll in half now? Are we going to put some stickers on some rolls? I'm pretty excited to see what you guys have come up with.
Yeah, so
you better get to name the roles at least too.
Yeah, so. And the most fun thing to do in an Ultimate Werewolf Legacy game would be to actually kill the people that you lynch in the game. So that to us was like that would be the best, and that would actually make the word ultimate very meaningful at that point. The cops would show up at the end of the night, and you get carted off to jail, but you'd have fun. Everyone else would be dead. You'd survive. That's kind of cool. And we would get a lot of publicity, not much of it very good probably, but a lot of PR from it. So yeah.
That's
I
awesome.
do have a question for you. Is it going to be like a true legacy game where you're ripping cards up, or is it going to be like one of those like soft legacy games where you can play through it and then when you get done, kind of move
He
stuff
did say
back
Rob
around?
Davio's involved, so
I know, but
So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to say that ripping up cards is what makes a legacy game a legacy game. There are decisions that are made. So basically, the structure, which we can talk about. I'm not going to give away any plot points or anything. The basic structure is that it's set up in a series of chapters. So there's 5 different chapters. Each of those chapters has most of them have 3 games in each of them, and they're designed to be played either over a night or a weekend where you play the 3 games in a row and try to play with the same people. Although you can switch people in and out, it's fine. Each game, the results of that game and decisions you make in the game, both as well, people you kill, who wins the game, as well as other decisions that are made during the game, it affects the next game within that chapter. And so each of the chapters has this, kind of building towards the end. And at the end of that chapter, the results of those first 3 games impacts what happens in the next chapter. So, for instance, maybe the villagers win every single game. They always get rid of the werewolves. That's great. Well, chapter 2 ends up being very, very different as a result because of that. And then if the werewolves had won all 3 games, and different things are introduced, and as a result, you end up having an entirely different experience depending on the group that you play with. And what happens in those games, and individuals, retain certain things. There's all sorts of things that happen legacy-wise. And again, I'm not going to go into details like if cards get ripped up or whatever. The one thing I can tell you is it's Ultimate Werewolf, so there's no board, so there's no putting stickers on a board.
gotcha. Okay.
There's other stuff that you're doing, but there's no stickers on the board. But it is a legacy game, so you're going to have things where you are changing. You are permanently changing the way the game is.
Could you have a card where it says you smack somebody?
Or when they just let you write in a
adult
rule,
version.
write in an
to
ability.
incite violence.
I was going to say it's probably not a bad idea. It goes a little closer to that whole killing them for real sort of thing that it's fun to talk about. But we're probably not going to end up doing it.
Probably not.
Yeah,
It's like 80% chance, right?
Yeah. Like I said, it's not guaranteed because again, think about the press we would get. I mean, really, seriously, you want to get board game mainstream, people being aware of what we're doing.
I started inviting
on the
people at
news.
cons. You're like, come on, come play.
Yeah,
Everything's fine.
exactly.
Don't mind
This
the
is the
guy
best
with
game
the
you'll ever
axe.
play, really, or the last one
It's-
you'll ever play.
It's great.
I'm pretty
sure to
okay
tweet
at
it out
werewolf,
before.
but I'm not sure I want consequences that are that real.
Can you imagine pleading for your life for real? No, don't really know where. Oh my God, don't really kill me.
When you die in the
It makes
game,
a
you
whole
die in
different
real
meaning
life.
at that point.
And It takes it up.
The cult
Yeah.
of werewolf.
You would have like crazy hard sales at the beginning because like everyone would want to know if it was real, and then like after that, after like let's say 2 months, you just see them like completely drop down, like just a crazy spike in sales, like maybe around April because everyone thought it was a gimmick, and then one stupid kid did it. That one kid.
Yeah.
And then
When your character dies, you have to rip your card, and it's full of a neurotoxin that knocks you out.
I like. We need to talk after the show. I like this. Yeah.
I don't think it's going to help sales, though.
Well, they've already bought the game, right? So
What if you do now? It's fine.
But normally,
Future
like,
sales.
word of mouth is really good for selling the game, and if all of your fans are dead, how can you get word of mouth around?
Okay,
but
so here's
the
the
ones
thing,
who are
right?
still alive at the time, they could be tweeting about the fact that they're still alive. So there's that.
That's sad.
Instagramming pictures of all the bodies in the floor.
I mean, you
This
could
this
hedge
podcast
it, but
has
it'd be
gotten
like the-
dark.
werewolf thing where there was like an ultimatum where if you died, you had to drink, and I'm stealing this from chat a little bit, you had to drink this crazy stupid hot sauce, but it's really a life elixir and it brings you back,
There we go.
and you can keep limit it to 2 times you can drink the elixir because there's just some people who can abstain from a 1,000,000 Scoville unit hot sauce, but just have something crazy in there.
I am very excited, even though it will not have those sorts of real life consequences. The game itself, it is incredibly compelling, and one of the reasons it's taken so long to get this going is we're making it so that people who don't play Werewolf can actually grab the game. One of those people who's never played before can moderate. Everyone who's never played before can play, and they're going to have a great time. We're going to do the right amount of hand-holding to make it fun for them, and still let people who've played before be able to jump in and have a lot of fun and not have to feel like they're being baby talked to.
So do we have any like guess or like any kind of time frame at all, or is it just still in development?
It's in development. Like I said, I think I really would like to get it out by next summer, this coming summer. It is a lot of it is done. There's a lot of additional playtesting needs to be done, some tweaking in terms of some of the content, but the bulk of it, kind of how it works, is done. It's more of all the polish that needs to happen, and that's a big time suck. And got to run a company, got to get other games out, all that stuff. So I got to dive in there because I know a lot of people are excited about it. I'm excited about it. But yeah,
fingers crossed for Gen Con.
I would love to have it out for Gen Con. Yeah, definitely.
Every publisher wants all their games out before Gen Con.
How is it actually developing a legacy game, if you don't mind talking about it just a little bit? Because from my perspective looking at it, it's a game, legacy games are always huge and like very complex and have a ton of moving parts, and everything meshes in such a way that you, the player, don't really see a lot of the back end and the design work that goes into making them so good.
Yeah, so that is naive me, who's never done a legacy game before, talking to a very experienced Rob Davia who has, and I mean, really, the email conversation was simply, from my end, it was, Rob, you can do this legacy stuff in your sleep at this point. You've put out a bunch of these, right? Yeah. I've done the werewolf stuff. I can do that in my sleep. This should take us a couple of months. We'll have this thing out in no time. And he's like, no, you don't understand. And I'm like, really? I have faith in you. You can do this. And he goes, yeah, no, it's not that. It's just there's so much to do. And I'm like, it can't be that much. Yeah, he was totally right, of course. It is an amazing amount of work going back and forth on these things. Every little change that you make at the beginning or at the end changes other stuff throughout. And it is, in order for a legacy game to work really well, it really has to be linked together. The whole thing has to become this big one cohesive unit. And you can't have, you can't account for everything, but you have to account for most things, the way it works. And, when we make changes and something doesn't work and we need to roll something back because of that, that affects other things. And when we roll those back, that affects other things. And, it is a nasty, nasty domino effect. And like I said, this is one of the things that's taken longer, and it requires an immense amount of focus and concentration just on the developing side to get it right.
That's awesome.
So kudos to everyone. I'm very excited about Charterstone, seeing what Jamie's done.
Oh, yeah.
There's very few folks, I think, that can pull that sort of thing off by themselves. I think he's probably one of them because he's done some amazing work with his other games, the level of complexity that he's put into them and how well everything works together. So, he's put a pretty high bar for himself already. But like I said, I think he's someone that could do it. So I'm very excited to see how that turns out.
Yeah.
Awesome. So overall, what would you say your philosophy behind designing and publishing games is?
I think the number one thing is I want to design games that I want to play, that either that there isn't a game like that out there. I mean, I think that's when you look at the different games, Werewords, I like code names. I like a lot of word games. But there was nothing there that actually had this stuff in it that had me wanting to play again and again and again. In Codenames, I played 2 or 3 times, and then that's good. I have a lot of fun. I'll come back to it. But there was nothing. There was no word game that I'd like to really want to just spend an evening playing. And Werewords kind of has filled that niche for a lot of people, which is they can play for again and again and again, and that's kind of cool. Suburbia is a result of me. I wanted a real city-building game that felt like it could be a board game and not some crazy chart-filled simulation that's Avalon Hill style, or also some really dumbed down thing. And think of Quadropolis as dumbed down, which is, I don't mean to insult Quadropolis, but it's so simplified that for me that's not as engaging. I'd rather have it be more, there are more going on underneath and more interesting things. So those games are games that I want to play. The upcoming Palace of Medking Ludwig that's coming out is a game that originally it was supposed to be a card game version of Castles of Mad King Ludwig, and it kind of turned into another tile-laying game so it's totally different because that's how game development happens sometimes. But it was a game, and that's because as I'm developing, I'm doing self-testing, I'm realizing, I don't like this. I don't like the way this makes me feel when I'm playing. This isn't interesting. I don't feel, I don't really care what's going on here. And when that sort of thing happens, you either make changes or you drop the game and go on to something else. And, I'm super excited. All the games we've published, I'm always excited to tell people how to play them and demo them. And I think that's definitely key for any designer or publisher, is that you never want to throw it over the wall and hope it gets done right and hope it's good. You want to be engaged with it so that when it's time for it to be published, you're able to, like Roby at Essen, I can't wait to show people the game and talk to other publishers and the press and potential customers about the game and demo it and show it off. That's exciting, and that's the sort of thing that kind of drives me in terms of designing games and publishing games.
That's awesome.
Is there an IP that's not like a Ware game and fantasy, right? Like maybe something you can never get your hands on that you would like to see become, like, if you just could, like, do you ever like wish that, like, man, I would love to make a Stranger Things, who's in the Upside Down, who's the Demogorgon type of thing, like, where's Beth?
I'm never the Demogorgon. I would never be the Demogorgon. It's too creepy, actually. That's way too creepy.
I say we lynch Ted. He's the Demogorgon, obviously. He just said he wasn't.
Actually, I would be. It's very clear to me the number one thing I would love to do, and I really haven't investigated this because if it actually would be available, I'd be obsessed with it. And I wouldn't do anything else for a year probably. Would be The Wire. If I could have the Wire IP and do, I don't know if it'd be a social deduction or if it would be kind of almost a civ building. Building up your drug empire versus building up your special forces set of police to go after them, that sort of thing. That would be awesome. That was such an engaging, deep series, and I think there's a lot of room to explore there in terms of gaming.
Awesome.
There are a lot of games where you're like, what? I'm going to do this turn. I'm going to take over this corner, and then I'm going to go over there. I'm going to shoot this person. Then I'm going to go back over here, and I'm going to take that corner where I shot that person. And that'd be kind of fun. So, but I think that would be the top of my list. Would be The Wire.
Sweet.
That is not an answer I expected, but a very good one.
Awesome. Cool. So, with all these social deduction games, do you have like a crazy story of something you remember happening in one of them? Is there anything just off the wall? Maybe not as intense as people dying out on the floor in real life.
No. I think one of my favorite Ultimate Werewolf moments was I was playing. I think it was BGG Con, and I was playing, and I was sitting next to a friend of mine, and Cupid had pointed to me and another guy. I think I was a villager. Yeah, I was a villager, and the other guy was a werewolf. And of course, you don't know this when you're Cupid because two people fall in love. And if the case happens that Cupid points to two people that happen to be on opposite teams, the only way that those two people can win is if they're the only two people left alive at the end of the game. So it's a really tough winning situation. It does happen sometimes, and it's fun. And I was sitting next to the person I was sitting next to was the seer. And so the first night she checks me, she says I'm a villager. She's like, "Dude, I know you're a villager. I'm the seer." I'm like, "Sweet, all right, cool." Now I didn't know if my partner that Cupid had pointed to was also was a villager or a werewolf at that point. But as time went through, I realized what was going on, and he was definitely a werewolf. I just knew he was a werewolf, and we're gonna have to start killing off everyone else because he actually threw another werewolf under the bus and other stuff. And so meanwhile, I'm sitting next to the seer who hasn't looked at him, and I'm making sure she doesn't look at him because I don't want him getting killed. Because then if he dies, I die. We both lose, and it doesn't really matter to me what happens anymore. But I got her totally convinced of my innocence because I was a villager, although I had an ulterior motive. And boy, that was pretty exciting to make it down to the end and keeping the seer alive as long as possible to make it look like that other guy was not a werewolf. And I don't know if she ever forgave me for that, but oh well. But that was pretty awesome. So that's pretty exciting. And I think those are the sorts of things that, when they stick with you, when you have that sort of a thing where it's so tense. And again, elimination is part of the game. Not the best mechanic ever, but at the same time, there's the pressure and that, you got to do the right thing because you don't want to be eliminated. And that's going to make you act a little differently and behave a little differently than if it was just, well, now you don't get as many points as you would get, had they not figured out something. Being eliminated is like the strong motivator for a lot of people. So it's kind of cool.
I think Werewolf's super interesting because even after eliminated, maybe it's just me, but I'm super interested in the game still, just to see what happens and see what's going on behind the scenes and see who's the evil werewolf that screwed me over and killed me and see what they're plotting. And I don't know, it's just super fun. It's like, I knew it was you, but I can't say anything and all that.
Yeah, stuff. And if I'm not a werewolf and I'm killed at night by a werewolf, and I'm already thinking, who are those people? And if I'm right, I'm so mad at myself for not figuring out how to get them killed beforehand. And if I'm wrong, I'm like, how can I be so stupid? It's so obvious. And it's just, that's a lot of fun. Yeah, I like that.
So with having played these games a ton, I'm sure you know a lot about them. Are you ever just targeted and singled out? Because they're like, Ted knows werewolf games. We got to kill off Ted first.
Absolutely, yeah. So it is unfortunate. It is rare that I play a game where people don't know who I am, and that almost never happens. When they do know who I am, then the nice thing is, for the most part, is they'll keep me around because I know stuff, and I can say, you know what? There's no way he would have said that if he was a villager because here's why, and I can explain it. And a lot of times I'm right just because I've moderated so many games. I've played so many games. But on the other hand, the werewolves are going to kill me then because they see that happening. They're like, oops, we're going to kill you. Or if I'm wrong, if I make one of those things and I'm wrong, well, then the villagers turn on me right away. There's no, oh, that's okay, you made a mistake. No. They're like, clearly he's in this, he's a werewolf, we're going to kill him off, and I'm out. So, yeah, it is unlikely that I survive to the end of a game. It happens sometimes now, but it's pretty rare.
Awesome. Do you have any tips for anybody being the werewolf? How do you hide under cover in between?
So it sounds stupid, but constantly I basically put myself in the mindset of, I wonder who the werewolves are, and I'm looking around and I'm looking at people and I'm just like looking at people. This is what I do as a villager. I'm trying to do the exact same thing, and I'm trying to think to myself, forget who's on my team, look around, scan, talk to people. If someone says something weird, werewolf or not, call them out on it and that sort of thing. Try to put yourself in the shoes of a villager who is looking for werewolves, who is a little paranoid about anyone could be a werewolf, if that's at all possible. That helps a lot. And don't fidget, because the more you fidget, seriously, if you see a player is doing this, then they're werewolf, because they can't focus on anything else. They're like, oh my god, I'm gonna get caught. Yeah, so.
Or you just look directly in Matt's eyes and say, Matt, are you a werewolf? And Matt says, I don't know. That's not what you say. Don't say I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know is not a good response. I would say that is not a positive.
That's probably one of my favorite werewolf moments ever, too, actually.
I don't know.
They're like, kill Matt! Kill him! Kill him!
Just like that innocence, that guilt. It's just like I don't know.
Yeah, that's the famous last words that end up on your tombstone. I don't know. And then we kill him.
Here lies Matt Robbins. He didn't know.
He didn't know.
I mean, have you noticed though, real quick, Roy? Matt does that a lot with social deduction games. Like when last time we played Battlestar Galactica,
I think that's his
maybe
thing
not the
now,
last time,
he
but
has to just act no matter which side.
What does the Cylon do? And then when we played Secret Hitler the first time. All right, everybody heads down. All right, bad guys heads up.
Okay,
all right,
good.
Cool, we're good. Bad guys heads down. I mean, Matt. I love playing social deduction games with Matt. It's always an adventure.
The only one that I'm actually any good at is deception, just because it's just like, yes, I've got all these cards in front of me. You can figure it out. I don't care. Yeah, it's me. Go for it.
Oh yeah.
Oh man. But to be fair, the times we played BSG and Secret Hitler were basically my first time playing.
No, I understand. I understand that, but I still like. To me, going back, like it's some of my best and favorite memories ever, because it's just like he just did that.
My strategy is definitely the same as like Ted sort of thing. Like, get yourself in the mindset of like, I am a good guy. I like, no matter which game, whether it's Battlestar Galactica or Shadows over Camelot or Werewolf or One Night Werewolf, it's like I'm trying to do the thing to help the people who aren't in the know, and pretend like, just forget that you're on the bad team. Just pretend like you're on a good team, and it works out pretty good until the very end of the game, when you're just like, now I remember I'm on the bad team, and you stab everybody in the back when it counts most. Good times.
You're
good
terrible
times.
for that.
You're welcome. Awesome. So Ted, what would you say is your overall favorite tabletop game of all time?
Probably Tichu. Tichu. For anything else, I'll always play Tichu. I can see myself playing Tichu pretty much until I'm dead or I can't hold cards anymore. So that would be the number one. As far as actual board games go, it's going to be a toss-up probably between like Caylus or El Grande or kind of one of the classic Euro style games.
Gotcha. So I haven't actually played Teach You. What makes it different from other trick-taking games, or is it just like that sort of same sort of
So
thing?
yeah, I mean, it's technically not a trick-taking game. It's a climbing game. It's essentially you're putting cards out and whatever. But there's different levels of strategy to it, and I think it's one of those games where you can get a crappy hand and you can still survive. You can make it not as bad as your hand looks to start with, because you're playing hands, you're going to up to 100 points, 0 to 100 points, or possibly more or less if you call Teach. But and you can mitigate the damage to yourself with a crappy hand. And if you have a really good hand, you can exploit it and go crazy and get 200 points, and do really, really well with it. And it's a partnership game, which is weird. But if you have a good partner or somebody you've been playing with a lot, you kind of know how their mind thinks when they're playing the game. It can be really, really fun. It's really rewarding when you do well, because you and your partner are kind of in sync as far as doing the right thing and playing the right cards. And it's a really, really deep game in terms of understanding a lot of the nuances of what's going to work and why you should do certain things. There's some very straightforward pieces, but there's also a lot of little things. And it is it's engaging, but at the same time you can play and you can actually have a conversation with the 3 other people you're playing with. You can be just chatting. You don't have to be, there's occasionally there's a little bit of AP where you're like, oh my god, I figure out this cards, give me a second. But for the most part, it's a little more relaxing, and you can just kind of hang out a little bit, and it's a good thing to do later in the evening. You don't need a ton of brain power to go through all the different permutations that you might if you were going to start a game of like Terra Mystica or Scythe or something, at 11 o'clock at night.
Awesome. So as far as like creating and designing and developing games, what inspires you to do that sort of thing?
For the most part, I mean, what I mentioned before, it's really things I want to play. There are whether it's a theme or a mechanic or something I enjoy that I would like to see better. In case of Ultimate Werewolf, I really want this to be better. I want a version of this game that's really up to my expectations. How I want to play the game, so I just made it at that point. Or if it's something like Suburbia, where it's a city building game, where I really would like a really good city building game that gives me that same sort of feeling I get from SimCity or some of those other sorts of games.
Nice.
And that's definitely a driver. The games I'm working on now that are in development, they all have that sort of thing. I know the big box strategy type games, they're all based on, I wish there was a game that did this. There isn't, so I'm going to make one. And hopefully it'll turn out good. If it doesn't, we'll scrap that and move on to something else. But that's the thing that really drives me is, I want to play X type of game that does something, and there's nothing out there that does that right now. So that's usually where the games, how they evolve over time.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I think we're doing pretty good on questions. We had lots and lots of social deduction talk. Matt, Rob, do you have any more questions you want to ask Ted before we start to close this thing out?
I mean, yes, but I don't know if he can answer them.
Oh, sure, they're all... if I can't, I'll either make something up or I'll
say
just sit here
NDA.
and not say anything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what's something that you're excited about that the public doesn't know about yet? Like, what's that game that you're just like, man, once this hits, and maybe it's not necessarily like the public doesn't know about it, but it's just like one of those things that you're keeping under wraps and you're excited for its possible future.
Sure. So there's two things. So one thing, it's probably not a big surprise, Whistle Stop was a big hit at Gen Con and people are excited. Yeah. So the designer's working on a expansion to it. I haven't actually seen the expansion, but he's taunting me by sending his playtest reports to me that describe what's happening. And so every time I've gotten 2 of these now, these detailed playtest reports about what people liked and what they didn't like about these games. And I'm like, oh my God, just send me a copy. I want to play this. This sounds awesome, but it's not ready for me yet. So that's cool. He wants to keep working on it until it's ready. But I'm super excited about that. So, hopefully in the next month or so, I'll get a copy of that to be able to play with. And it's funny, we talked about the designer, Scott Caputo, was at Gen Con with me. And, when the game sold out the first day, by late afternoon, it was all sold out. We brought a lot more copies than we thought we would sell an entire weekend. It was gone. We're chatting about different things, and I'm like, so have you been working on an expansion at all for it? And he goes, I will be as soon as I get back. And
awesome.
then we talked about a couple different ideas, and the one idea that we had that we both I don't know how we came up with it, if it was his or mine, or we just kind of arrived there. It's such a fun, cool idea, and I'm so excited about the idea, whether it turned into a game or not, but it appears like it's actually working in his playtest. So that's super exciting. So that's one thing. The other one is a social deduction game that I am making, not on spec, but one of our partners, we have a lot of partners in different areas of the world that publish our games in different languages. One of them came to me and said, you know what, we'd like to do this. Do you think you could design a game like that's this? And that's kind of a weird thing, because normally I'm like, unless I'm already inspired to do it, I'd be like, eh. But in this particular case, I was like, you know what, I've already thought about doing something like that. I really haven't followed up with it, but because you're interested in it, I'll give it a shot and see what I come up with. And I did, and I am absolutely super excited about that. And I can't really say much more about it because it's still a ways off. But the playtests we've done so far have been really positive. It's like stuff I've done before, but it's different, and it's just very exciting. So yeah, I'm very excited for the stuff we're going to put out in 2018. We already talked about Legacy and Werebeast that are coming out. Those are great games. Another one night that we're working on, which is going to be awesome. There's that. Very excited about the stuff we're doing next year. I was excited about this year already, and I'm thrilled with the stuff we put out. But next year, I'm super excited too.
Good.
That's awesome.
Hype. Awesome, man. Well, is there anything else you'd like to talk about or promote before we wrap this thing up?
I don't think so. I mean, you guys can, everyone can find me and our games at BezierGames.com or at Bezier Games on pretty much every social media thing that's out there: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, etc. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Absolutely.
Ted. It's definitely a ton of fun.
Thanks for having me, guys. This was a lot of fun. It's always fun to talk about games, so I appreciate it.
Well, yeah. We try to be laid back and chill and just have a good time, so yeah. Happy to have you.
Awesome. Well, we stream these Tuesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Time at youtube.com/Epic Gaming Night. We do want to say thank you so much to our amazing patrons who help make this show possible. If you want to support Epic Gaming Night and what we're doing, make sure to check us out at patreon.com/Epic Gaming Night. And also make sure to hit us up on Twitter and Instagram to see what we're doing in the board gaming sphere and things we're excited about in board gaming. There is a Roy versus Rob video coming up on the Dice Tower. It should be out next Wednesday. We're going to be playing the new Ashes decks, and I put a lot of editing work into that video, so make sure to check that out on the Dice Tower.
You did a good job.
And always make sure to check out our favorite Game Friday videos that we put out as well. So tons of fun. Thanks everybody for stopping by. Thanks everybody in chat. You're all great.
Thank you, Ted. Thanks everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Bye. Peace.
Thank you so much.